So we are going to be starting a workshop shortly on testing and CI for building generative AI applications. I'm just going to share my screen in both of the apps I'm using. So yes, hopefully everyone can see my screen. Give me a shout if you can't, please. Yeah, so what we're going to do today is we're going to go through a workshop where everyone who's watching can follow along. So what you can do is you can go to this URL, deploy.helix.ml, and you can actually provision your own virtual machine that using that VM through the browser. You don't need anything beyond being able to use your browser and installing a CLI tool. You can follow along with everything that I'm going to show you. So yeah, I'm just going to jump straight in. And if people join a bit late, then hopefully you can catch up by reading the doc. I'll also paste the link to this doc so you can access it yourselves, both in Zoom over here. I'm going to send it to everyone. And I think there's a chat thing here. So I'll just be 1 second. Just trying to find the chat interface on streaming thing. There it is. Okay. Cool. So yeah, check it out. bit.ly/testing-GenAI. Make sure you can show up in this document, and this has everything that you need to follow along. So I see some people joined already. So yeah, let me kind of just walk you through the initial steps. So the first thing we're going to try and do is provision one of these virtual machines that you can provision quite easily. And the way to do that is to go to deploy.helix.ml. And I'll log out to show you what it looks like when you get there. So if you go to deploy.helix.ml, you should see a screen like this. You can then log in or register to spin up one of these virtual machines. So if you click login, you get to this page. It's not super obvious, but you can either register with a Google account if you have a Google account, just by clicking this Google button here, or if you don't have a Google account, then you can click this register button and just register with an email address. If you register with an email address, then it can sometimes take a couple of minutes for the confirmation email to come through. So just be patient if that happens, yeah, give me a shout either in the comments or on Slack or Discord if you aren't able to. If you're not able to access that email, then we can manually approve your account. So yeah, let's just sign in with a Google account. That's the easiest thing to do because then you don't need to verify your email address. And then as soon as you are in the deployment system, you can see an invitation to write a deployment name. Just give this any old name like workshop. And then click create. And then what you'll see is that hopefully very quickly, we spin up this virtual machine for you. And if you're interested in nerding out, and then you can access an SSH session through the web interface, but you don't need to do that. That's just if you want to poke around. When you do that, it connects you to a tail command, which is tailing the output of the cloud init log, which is like installing all the stuff. You can hit Control-C and then you can run top, and you can see this is a real VM, or you can run things like Docker PS, and you can see that we're running this GenAI stack here just on a single machine as a collection of Docker containers. By the way, if you want to install what we're showing you on your own infrastructure rather than one of these trial VMs, that is kind of the whole point of Helix, is that you can run it locally. Then you can go to our docs here, docs.helix.ml, go to private deployment quick start. There's a one-line command that you can run on your own Mac or Linux machine with an NVIDIA GPU, or even a Windows machine with WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux. If you have an NVIDIA GPU on there, you can run everything I'm going to show you fully locally. And why should we care about running things fully locally? It's because it allows businesses to run their own AI that they fully control, and which is within their own existing security infrastructure. It means that you don't have to go through kind of compliance and regulatory challenges to use AI. You can just spin it up on your own infrastructure. And especially what we've seen recently in the last week or so with DeepSeek making the news, it's clear that these open source models that are that you can run locally because they're open source are getting better very quickly. So it's worth paying attention to open source models that you can run on your own infrastructure. And anyway, this workshop's about testing, so I won't get too distracted by running things locally. But what you should see here is in your Launchpad deployment, hopefully you've managed to sign up, like register and log in, spin up a deployment, and then you can either hit the Open Terminal button to muck around, but more interestingly, you can click Launch UI. And that's going to launch that instance that we just provisioned in your browser. And then because it's a private dedicated instance, what you see here is that we've got a separate user system for your deployment. So while you've just signed up and registered for an account on our Launchpad, you now also need to sign up for a new account inside your Helix deployment itself. So the way you do that is you just hit the login and register button in the bottom left, and then you have to register for a new user here. We don't have Google OAuth turned on automatically for new deployments, so you have to go through and register with an email address. But there's no email verification on this user sign up, so we can just sign up here. I'm just going to use my details. And of course, you should put your own details in here when you're signing up for the Helix deployment that's running on your VM, if that makes sense. So yeah, now that you're connected, we can see what we can do with this. So the first thing you can do is start a new session, and you might say, "Tell me a joke." And the default model, which is Llama 3.1 Instruct, always tells this joke about Pavlov's dogs and Schrodinger's cat. But a more interesting thing we can do is we can select from the model dropdown in the top right. We can select DeepSeek. So we can go in and get DeepSeek R1, which is the full-fat 691 billion, I think, parameter model. And then we can ask this amazing, powerful reasoning model to tell us a joke. And what it'll do is it will start by thinking for a while. And this is how these reasoning models work. They have this sort of initial stage of thinking about the answer before giving the answer. And it came up with a slightly better joke than Llama 3, I guess. But where these models will really shine is in doing much more complex work, like actually difficult work that requires someone or an LLM to think quite hard about what the right answer might be, or take into account lots of different information. So yeah, hopefully, if you're following along at home, you should have got to the stage where you've got a Helix deployment in the Launchpad, and then inside your Helix deployment, you've created a new account. By default, every new account is an admin account, so you're able to see the dashboard, for example. You can see those LLM calls that went to the back end. You can see, for example, this was the LLM call to come up with this name of the session that gets created automatically every time you type in your chat session. So you can go in and you can kind of open the hood and see exactly what's going on underneath in terms of how Helix is actually sending LLM calls to the backend. Whether it's the GPU that you have running locally, or whether it's an external LLM provider like OpenAI or Together AI or Anthropic. So that's all good. We've got a mid-level model to tell us a joke. We've got a very intelligent model to reason about and then tell us a joke. But where this gets more interesting and where testing and CI comes into this, excuse me, is when you do more interesting things than to just do chat sessions. And those more interesting things are all setting up apps. So we have this notion in Helix of apps, and an app is like a collection of a model, a prompt, also knowledge. So RAG, if you're familiar with retrieval augmented generation, it's this idea of being able to chunk documents up into pieces and then select relevant pieces to include in the context for the LLM. So basically, it allows the LLM to refer to relevant facts when constructing the answer. So you can basically give it knowledge by giving it context. The other key feature is this ability to do API integrations, where you can connect the system to an external API, maybe a business system. Maybe you've got Jira and you want to be able to chat about your Jira issues, or maybe you have Salesforce and you want to help your sales team be more productive or something like that. So there you can plug this stack into different APIs. So I'll show you a couple of these quickly. So the first one is just prompting. So let's make a comedian. So if you go into your apps inside Helix, or you can also get there from the homepage, and then scroll down to AI-powered apps, and then you can hit the new app button, and that will redirect you quickly to that new app. What you can then say is like, okay, let's make an app which is a comedian. And I was playing around with this earlier, so we can say you are funny, and we can say hey to the comedian, and it just says hey back at ya, what's up? Or we can switch this out to use DeepSeek, in which case if I say hey, then DeepSeek may well in this case, it concluded it didn't need to reason about such a simple request as hey. But if I ask it to tell me a joke, then it will probably think a little bit harder. So that's all fine. It's thinking about making a scarecrow joke. But what you noticed here, okay, that's actually kind of funny. And it added a little another crop. Okay, never mind. I'm going to stop laughing at AI generated jokes. But the idea here is, what if we wanted this comedian to always tell us a joke? Maybe it's a requirement for this application that it tells a joke on every interaction. But at the moment, it's not doing that. So what we'd like to be able to get to is, can we write a test? Like if you were developing software, you would quite naturally want to develop tests, to be able to run integration tests against your software every time. For example, every time that you make a change, in order to make sure that the quality of the software is good. And exactly the same thing is true for these GenAI applications. So wouldn't it be nice if we could write tests and then run them automatically against these applications as we build them? So I'll come back to that in a second. I do just want to show you the other types of applications that you might want to develop. I mentioned these already, so let's go ahead and have a look. So here, for example, we have a presentation, a PDF, and what I want to do is download that PDF. So you can do this yourself. Go ahead and follow the link in this document, which if you're just joining us now is at bit.ly/testing-GenAI. So bit.ly/testing-GenAI. And what we can do, you follow the link down here under knowledge, go ahead and download that PDF, and then you can, in your Helix deployment, and then you click the download button on Google Drive, which is this one here, and that will actually download it onto your computer. And then what we can do is let's figure out like how to upload that application, how to upload that PDF into Helix, which is using this local model and all running privately. So that's really nice because now you can like actually use all the data in your business. You don't have to worry about some data is too private or too secret to use with AI. If you deploy a secure deployment of Helix, then you can use all of your data and lock down who can access it, like I'm sure you already do. So I'm going to call this one a talking brochure because I'm going to try and get it to sell stuff for me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a knowledge source. So I'm going to give it some files, and I'm going to call this PDFs. You give it any name, which is just like a collection, basically. Knowledge sources are just collections of documents, so just give the collection a name. So click Add there. And then what you can do is you can drag and drop files into this drop zone here. Oops, just disappeared. That's annoying. Sorry about that. Let's try that again. So PDFs, click Add there. And then I'll click Save, and then it won't disappear. Of course, we haven't uploaded any files to this knowledge source yet. So let's click here. We can upload that PDF. And then, yeah, as soon as you hit Save, then what that should do is index the PDF. So what that does is it takes the PDF, it extracts all the text out of it, and then it chunks that text up into pieces. And then those pieces go into what's called a vector database. And then the way that works is you can kind of think of when you then talk to this assistant, what's actually happening. If you toggle this, you can kind of look under the hood of what's happening. So I might ask, who are the founders? Or actually, I'm going to ask a better question. Sell me on helix.ml. And you can see like a bunch of different chunks of that PDF have been extracted. For some reason, they kind of come out as like HTML. But those chunks, remember that we're kind of looking behind the scenes here. These chunks correspond to things that are relevant to the query. And so what you can now do is you can say, sell me on helix.ml. And it will do a reasonably good job of describing that. What I was playing with earlier was getting DeepSeek to do an even better job, and I was actually fairly impressed by what I saw there. So I can hit launch this app kind of in this view that users can consume it in. I can say sell me on helix.ml, and it spends a little bit of time thinking about thinking about the answer. If you're not interested in the thinking, you can just click that button and make it go away. Um, and yeah, looks like Together AI's DeepSeek is a little bit busy at the moment. But what I found was it's worth the wait, because when DeepSeek does actually finish the conclusion, then it comes up with, or at least it did previously come up with, kind of really quite a good answer. Then we can all just watch DeepSeek reasoning. It seems to be tying itself up in knots about how to do citations in the RAG source. So, which actually is a good point. We need to improve the prompting about how we do RAG to clarify this. I find it quite funny watching DeepSeek try and figure out like how to interact with humans. Oh, there we go. So yeah, I was quite impressed just by the sort of the default formatting it does, and I thought they were quite nice. And it did figure out how to render the reference to the company deck correctly. So yeah, I mean that's pretty cool. But remember, we're here because we're interested in whether we can start writing tests for these systems, so that we're not just like doing evals by vibes, which is the joke. Like you're not meant to just like play around with these systems and then decide whether you like the answer based on just kind of manually QAing it. You should have an evals framework which allows you to consistently and reliably test the application on every single on every single commit, every single change to the configuration. So yeah, we will come to that shortly. The very last thing I want to do is show you an API integration. So here we can do an API integration with exchange rates. So I'm going to go in and make a new app. We're going to call it exchange rates. And we can just use Llama 3.1 for this one, although it does also work with DeepSeek. So what I'm doing is I'm adding an API tool. So the idea here is that you're giving the LLM an additional tool, which is the ability to make API calls to this API. Because what you want to do if you have an exchange rates model or an exchange rates assistant, you don't want that assistant to have to rely on its kind of built-in knowledge of the exchange rates, because the exchange rates are obviously constantly fluctuating. So you need up-to-date live information, and this is how you can do that. You can pull up-to-date live information into the context by using these API tools. So we can hit save on that thing, and then we can say, what is the current US dollar to Japanese yen rate? And then what it does, you see the little glowing orb, is it makes an API call and it fetches the latest rate. So $1 is 155 Japanese yen. And then it also lists a bunch of other rates, which must have come back kind of in the API response. So, for example, if you go into the dashboard in your Helix deployment here, you can go and look at the preparing the API request, interpreting the response. So you can actually see in here, this is the raw API response that came back from the API. And you can see it does indeed list like a whole bunch of other currencies. So what we might want to do is we might want to update the prompting for this app to make it not show any of those other rates, because the user just asked for a specific rate. And so it would be fairly straightforward to add some prompting to do that. So that's the kind of thing you might iterate on when you're doing testing for these apps is like one of the tests might say only ever show the exact exchange rate that the user asked for when they ask a certain prompt. Okay, so I'm going to finally get on to testing. I promised I would talk about testing. I've now shown you the three different types of things you might want to be able to test. Just basic prompt-based assistance, where you might want to tell them to be funny, and so on. RAG-based assistance, where you might want to add specific knowledge. And API integrations, where you want to bring kind of up-to-date live information from an internal system or some external API. So the way that we're going to do testing is to download and install the Helix CLI, and then we're going to clone this repo that's called testing GenAI. So the best way to create tests at the moment is by adding them to the YAML file format. So this is actually an important point, which is that all of these applications that we have in here, we created them by pointing and clicking buttons in the web interface, but they're also represented by this YAML spec. So the exchange rate, well, I'll show you a simpler one to begin with, sorry. So if we start with the comedian is the simplest assistant. If we start with the comedian, the spec for the comedian is simply this. I'm a comedian with model DeepSeek R1, and the system prompt is "you are funny." So what you can do is you can take this YAML spec, which is also a valid Kubernetes CRD in case you're into that sort of thing, and then you can put this in version control, and then you can start testing and deploying that application at the right point in the software development lifecycle. So you might test it every time there's a pull request or a new commit, and you might deploy it every time a pull request gets merged into the main branch. So in that way, we can do software and DevOps best practices with these GenAI applications that are defined through configuration. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go and install the CLI. The way to do that is to go to the account and API section of here, and then I'm going to make a new terminal. Let's see, grab this one here, make it nice and big so everyone can see, hopefully. And we can run this install command. So that will just install the CLI on your local machine. Will only take a few seconds. And then you also need to set some environment variables to authenticate to your specific Helix deployment. Now, remember, this is talking to the dedicated deployment that you've got like a VM for. Let's see. We should now be able to do Helix app ls. Okay, great. So that worked. The CLI is plugged into your deployment. It's making API calls, and it's able to list the different applications that we've already deployed. So one note, by the way, is if you're running on Windows, the commands there won't have worked for you unless you're running WSL2, which is Windows Subsystem for Linux. If you are using Windows, there's a section in the docs that you can expand here that shows you how to download helix.exe from our releases. And then there's a slightly different spelling of environment variable setting that you do in PowerShell, which if you're like a Windows Power user, you probably already know this. But we've kind of spelled out like how to do that here. And yeah, so feel free to expand the little heading that says if using Windows in the doc. Right, testing. Let's do some testing. So the first thing I'll do is show you what you can do, because you might want to be following along. You can go ahead and clone this testing GenAI repo. And in fact, if you want to modify it, then feel free to fork the repo, which you can do on GitHub. and that's actually a good idea. So what you can then do is fork the repo and then clone it from your own version, or you can just clone this one. So let's do git clone on that testing GenAI repo. And then if you look inside the testing GenAI repo, there's a whole bunch of examples that we've developed. And the one that I'm going to show you today is comedian.yaml. Actually, I'm going to show two of them. We're going to look at comedian.yaml, and then we're going to set up GitHub Actions with the exchange rates app. And I'm going to break the exchange rates app and then show you how we can do that. Pull request, commit, test flow, which is kind of the bread and butter of software development. So let's look at the Comedian to begin with, and I'll just show you a basic example of testing. So if you go into the Comedian file, and actually to begin with, let's take out the prompt to always tell a joke. So go in and edit that comedian.yaml and change the system prompt to just say you are funny, and not have that last bit of always tell a joke. So let's just have the system prompt be you are funny. And then we can do helix apply -f on comedian.yaml, which if you're familiar with Kubernetes, we're trying to align with the kind of Kubernetes way of doing things. If you're not familiar with Kubernetes, all that means is that this is a sort of declarative configuration. You can apply it over and over again, and if it hasn't changed, then it won't change it. If it has changed, it will update it. If it didn't exist yet, then it will create it. So it will kind of apply it declaratively. And so what you can do is helix apply -f on comedian.yaml, and then we can go in here. We can go to your apps, or in fact, you can go to the App Store on the homepage, and you can see, oh, look, we've got this comedian here, which is this nice Bill Hicks figure. So we can say, hey to Bill Hicks, and Bill refuses to tell us a joke. And that's interesting because we've got a joke defined in our comedian.yaml. Not a joke, sorry. We've got a test. We've got a test defined in our comedian.yaml in this test stanza here. And the test is that the comedian must tell jokes. The way that test works is that it starts by sending a prompt, and that prompt is just the word hey, and then the expected output is a joke, and it must be an actual joke. And so then what's going to happen when we run helix test -f is that it's going to read in this file, create an ephemeral app in an ephemeral namespace inside the Helix deployment with this exact configuration. And then it's going to run through each of the tests, sending the prompt to the system, which might include RAG or API calling. And then it's going to use an LLM as a judge to evaluate whether the response from the system matches the expected output using natural language as the way that you define what is a pass or a fail for this test. And the reason that we have to use another LLM as a judge is that the responses are always going to come back as natural language, or they might do. If they're coming back as natural language, they might vary slightly. You might get a different joke every time you ask for one. But the LLM is actually very good at that job of evaluating whether a response matches the expected or desired response. So what we can do here is we can do helix test -f on comedian.yaml, and it's going to go ahead and run the tests. It's nice and quick, and then we can load up the test report. And oh, interesting! Look, the test is failing because the response is a casual greeting and an invitation to chat, but does not contain an actual joke. And I mean, it's kind of not surprising that it doesn't contain an actual joke because we took out that instruction to tell a joke on every interaction. So here we can see, yeah, the test is failing because it sent this. Let me show you. it sent the prompt "Hey" to an assistant that was configured with the system prompt "You are funny." Um, the LLM responded with, "Hey, Bacacho, what's on your mind? Want to chat about something in particular or just shoot the breeze?" And then another LLM instance was asked to evaluate whether this response matched the expected output of a joke. And that LLM graded that response as a fail. And so, in this way, you can automatically test hundreds of different cases or dozens of different cases that you might have for these LLM apps that you're building on very specific things, like do they correctly interact with an API in all the required ways and things like that. So, yeah, let's try and fix this this comedian. So we'll fix the comedian by saying, "You are funny, always tell a joke." And then we can run the test again. It feels like running the test locally, even though it's actually running against the real backend. And then you can hit that. And now we've got a passing test. Hooray! The response provided is a short, humorous anecdote with a punchline, which is characteristic of a joke. And what we could even do, if we want to get fancy, is upgrade the comedian to use DeepSeek. I'm just going to remind myself of the exact name of the DeepSeek model. Here, it's DeepSeek R1. So we copy paste the model name in there into the YAML spec. And now we can test the comedian running on DeepSeek, DeepSeek R1. Now, because DeepSeek does that thinking phase, it takes a little while longer to come up with a joke compared to just running regular old Llama. But now we can see that indeed we got, "Why don't skeletons fight each other?" And they don't have the guts. Which is interesting. It's the same joke that we got earlier. So DeepSeek is clearly fairly deterministic in this environment. But we are now getting a pass result. And Llama is even okay with there being a smiley, like an emoji in the response. So yeah, this is pretty cool. We can now do CI/CD for DeepSeek apps. And we can build these layers on top of these more powerful LLMs as they come out that do not just prompt engineering, but also RAG and API integrations. We can wrap those all in a nice declarative YAML spec that we can pass around through the software development lifecycle and test at every point while capturing all of the different requirements in that test suite. And then we can merge and deploy that application when it lands in the main branch and get that application deployed to production. So the last thing I'm going to do in this demonstration, in which you're welcome to follow along with at home, is to actually integrate this with GitHub Actions. And you might be using Jenkins, you might be using GitLab, or whatever you're using for you might be using Circle CI. Whatever you're using, it's fairly easy to adapt the GitHub Actions workflow or the GitLab workflow that we've created here. So I'll start by showing you those workflows. So now we're really like talking about software and DevOps. What we have here is a workflow which it's a CI workflow which takes in the Helix URL and Helix API key as variables and secrets, respectively. And then it has two cases. It has the push case and it has the pull request case. So when pushing to the main branch, that corresponds to a deployment, because your main branch, if you're doing continuous delivery, you might ship changes every time you push changes to the main branch. The pull request one is the first one to look at, which is the testing case. So if you open a PR, it would be awfully nice if we could automatically test all the different cases with against that are defined in your helix.yaml, like your GenAI application configuration against any APIs or RAG data. And so that test and comment one checks out the code it installs the Helix CLI in exactly the same way you will have done already on your computer, and then it runs Helix test. And then depending on, and then it will comment on the PR with the summary latest.md file, which puts a nice summary of the test results on the pull request. And then on deployment, which is when it's a push to the main branch or a merge into the main branch, it will install the Helix CLI again, test, and then if the test is successful, then it will do an apply. So this should be easy to adapt to your environment. Maybe you want to test a specific file, so you do -f on the tests. Maybe you need to port this to run on Jenkins or whatever with the Jenkins configuration language, but that should all be fairly straightforward. So yeah, let's go ahead and do that. We're going to use this testing GenAI repo here. And so what I'm going to do is I am going to go ahead and break the exchange rates app, because the exchange rates app, I believe, is the one that's being tested by default in this workflow. Yes, exchange rates.yaml is being tested and deployed. So let's go in and look at this exchange rates app. So this is actually, I was mentioning earlier about how you might want to customize the exchange rates app to only show currencies that the user was asking about. Well, we've actually done that in this YAML spec. So we've done that by updating the response success template to say if the user presented a currency pair, then only present the given currency rate against the base rate. And that way, this application, when you run it, I'll just apply it quickly. Exchange rates. Yeah, this application, when you run it, it will. I can just pick it from here. What is USD GBP? It will only show that one currency against the dollar. So that's pretty cool. Like already we can see here that there's sort of additional customization. You can check our docs for all the details, but there's additional customization, or join our Discord if you need help with this. But there's additional customization that you can make to the prompting in the way that you've configured this system to integrate with the API. And then, but yeah, what I said I was going to do was I was going to start by just breaking this exchange rates app. So I'm going to just give myself a place to copy that into. And I'm going to be, I'm going to break the app by making it always invent a funny limerick about a man called Bob. And so instead of doing exchange rates, this app is always just going to do funny limericks. Now we can just kind of manually test that by going in here, new session, this exchange rates app. What is USD GBP? And yeah, limericks. That's not what I want. I want exchange rates. So let's test whether. Actually, I'm going to be naughty. I'm going to start by just committing this straight to the main branch. I'm going to say break the exchange rates app. This is only a test repo, so please forgive me. Sorry, I just need to. Fix up my remotes. Okay, so I've gone ahead and broken the build. I mean, I've broken the app because I want to show you how you can make a pull request to fix it. Now, this actually, I think, isn't going to work. The reason it's not going to work is that we haven't yet configured yeah, we haven't yet configured this repo to point to our Helix deployment. So let me just show you quickly how you do that. You set secrets and variables for GitHub Actions. You can go in and change a variable. If you edit this variable here, let's point it at this Helix deployment, the one that we just provisioned. Under here, that's the URL. So if you're following along at home and you want to point maybe your fork of this testing GenAI repo at your Helix deployment that you've got in your virtual machine, then you can go in and add or update the Helix URL variable to point to the URL of your deployment. And then I just need to quickly do security things. There we go. So that's saved that variable. I can then go in and modify the secret as well. Just need to update that to use the Helix API key. So I'm going to update that secret. Excuse me. So now I should be able to rerun this job, and then we'll see if it's able to actually test the exchange rates app that I think I've just broken, because we tried it out, didn't we? And it was just doing silly limericks instead of exchange rates. Let's see. Just going to run the tests on merge to main. Yay, it failed. Okay, the test failed, saying the response did not mention the US dollar to GBP exchange rate. And then, you know what? It didn't bother to deploy the app to production. So we saved ourselves. I mean, I did manually deploy it to production, so it didn't actually. But in reality, I wouldn't have just deployed to production from my local checkout without committing it. And so the fact that the tests ran here would have stopped the broken version on main getting deployed into production. So at least there's that. It's we test before we do deploys. But yeah, let's try and fix that app and make a pull request. So we're going to be good engineers instead of the bad engineer that I've been so far, pushing broken code to main. So if we come in here and we say, let's switch to a new branch, no more limericks, and then we go back in here, and instead of the funny limerick, we say, oops. Oh, I didn't actually save what it was previously. Sorry, let me just go and dig that out of version control. Here it is. Okay, so so I rescued that working template, and what I can do now is I can, I think that's going to work. Let's test it. So we do Helix test -f on exchange rates. See if it's running. Pull that up here. So we go and grab the test report. Okay, it worked. So that works in two cases. And then, so that's good. We haven't yet committed it. So we can do a commit, fix, use correct prompt, and we can push that to the branch. And then as soon as we go in and we can make a pull request, and then as soon as we, as soon as we hit hit the PR button to make a pull request, GitHub Actions is going to kick in, provision a virtual machine from the big pool of VMs that they have at Microsoft, spin up our test, install the Helix CLI, run the tests, and look, the test is passing, and it's commented on the PR. So that's rather wonderful. if we hit refresh on here, yeah, you can see the test results are all displayed nicely integrated with your pull request system. You can go and view the full test report, and it runs the tests in parallel. So you can see the inference time is like 2 seconds per test, but only took 3.5 seconds overall. Um, so yeah, that's pretty cool. What would be even cooler is if we can hit merge and then automatically get that change deployed to fix the broken assistant that's running in production. So let's quickly go in here, go to our currency exchange rates. What is JPY to USD? Which version of the app are we going to get? Oh, okay, so it deployed it already. It fixed it. Let's double check that. Yeah, it's merged. And it got a nice tick. And yeah, it's already fixed and it's working nicely. So yeah, that is how you can configure these GenAI apps as version controlled configuration and test them. And that all now works with DeepSeek as well. So you can get top state-of-the-art open source reasoning models. You can integrate them with your private knowledge. You can deploy them locally on your own infrastructure. You can integrate them with your own business systems. You can version control the configuration for all of that. And then you can run tests and evals on those at every different stage of the software development lifecycle to ensure that you're shipping quality GenAI applications. So yeah, that's the workshop. I hope you were able to follow along at least some of the different pieces that we work through here. Feel free to, if I went a bit too fast, feel free to come back later and work through this document, which has everything I talked about in it. So bit.ly/testing-GenAI. Yeah, the last thing I'll say is that if you have any thoughts on what you'd like to see in future workshops, or if you'd like a private workshop, which we've done several of now and people quite like them, just to deep dive into setting up testing for, like a specific use case for your own business, then yeah, please drop me an email. My email's Luke at helix.ml. And I would be very happy to get an email from you, and then we can set up a time to do some one-to-one pairing and hack on some cool GenAI stuff together. Similarly, if you've got a business use case and you want to talk about doing some work with us, then please drop me a line. The next workshop will be in 2 weeks, and it will be listed on the same link that I think you found this one on. We are thinking about doing a Kubernetes workshop next, but drop us a note if you have specific thoughts on what you'd like to work on. I think this link for registering for the workshop in 2 weeks will be updated probably later tonight. So the link to register for the next one is there. So awesome. If you have any questions, please drop them in Discord, which you can access here in the document, bit.ly/helix-discord. Please do come and show up in our Discord channel and ask questions. And if you got stuck on anything, that's the right place to come and ask for help. Happy to help, and I know my colleagues are too. So thanks very much for coming. I hope this workshop was useful, and hopefully see some of you at the next one in 2 weeks, same time, same place. Awesome. Thank you so much. Bye.